Well, good morning. Actually, good afternoon, Aristo. It is afternoon your time, morning mine.
It's
Um,
past 3, I think. Close to 4, maybe. No, it's 2:49, I guess. 2:50, close to. So good morning, Ron.
yes, we've talked a little bit about. We actually came up with a title, Empowerment 101: Beyond Awakening, which is a continuation of the video that you did last week. And so I'm going to just let you, as I normally do, let you speak and interject if necessary, but maybe not. Thank you. Go for it.
Of course. It's 8:50 as I start my conversation. We talked about signs and portents. Ron usually uses triple numbers, but in esoteric lore, all you have to do is basically add up the numbers. So now we have an addition. 8 plus 5 is 13, I guess. And 13 is a transition. It's a 4, yes. And it's also a 12 with 1 in the center, like the witch's coven, or the 12 apostles and Jesus in the center. It's the central figure that makes 13 unstable because it makes the 12 mobilize. It's not just a static balance like the zodiac wheel. It's a mobilization. It's a cause for change, but it's also a grounded mobilization. Now, I'm saying this in order to create a bridge with the previous video. The previous video also has the same, should have the same title. I want to create a series of just, food for thought, because you can't really go and claim, I can't. I'm going to trade you and blah, 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 this and that. All I want to do is present some things. I want to bridge a gap, or try to bridge a gap, between the bigger picture and the smaller pictures. There's the smallest picture, which is, practically speaking, of us as individuals, how we engage in self-improvement, so to speak, self-activation. Then there's the big, really big picture, which is about the cosmos, what's going on there, from mystical stuff to alien agendas, whether they're real or not, to the nature of the cosmos, to evolution as a whole, et cetera, dimensions and all of that. And then there's an intermediary picture, which is the socio-political domain, which also is a very, very hazy area and is probably the more challenging area, because with the cosmic picture, you either believe it or you don't. And basically, it's a matter of what's meaningful for you. Is from what you see in everything, do you really see demons or gods or aliens or just a random cosmos or God? And I don't know what, But whatever you see, as long as it comes from your sense of deep meaning, the biggest picture is not so much we need the facts. We don't really need those facts, in my honest opinion. It doesn't really matter. First of all, whether there's Anunnakis or the Boston Red Sox, or I don't know who, out in the cosmos flying around doing things, it doesn't really matter all that much to the individual or to the socio-political domain. We haven't seen it affect us. We haven't even felt it affect us in a way that's identifiable that way. We can do just fine without it. However, we do desire that bigger picture to complete our own sense of meaning. In other words, we have no choice, because I can't tell you what the bigger picture is and force it on you. I can't say I have the facts. I can say that I sense the truth. Those are two different things, in my honest opinion. The facts are self-evident or not. They are the so-called objective thing. They are the data we get. The truth is the very foundation of our being, in continuity with the foundation of the being of the world, of the universe, of society, of everything. It's a continuity of presence, of essence, of what everything is and the meaning behind it. The truth is something we can sense, but we don't sense it in the same way as facts. So what is the truth? Well, if you find your genuine, authentic sense of meaning, that is the foundation of the truth. Well, is my truth different than your truth? Well, am I all that different from you? Am I disconnected from you? Am I an alien to you? If I am, then my so-called truth is different. Then there is no God. Because if God encompasses everything, nothing can be separate from anything else. Because if it was outside of God, then it wouldn't be God, right? Or divinity or goddess or all of it, So if you do believe that my truth is ultimately at the foundation level separate from your truth, and I'm not talking about the nuances or the details of individualized expression. That's not truth. That's preference. That's my disposition and particular expression, because the truth is singular, but it's multifaceted. It's like our Earth, okay? Our Earth is a big-ass planet, in relation to us, our perspective, but it's full of many things. Is the Earth a mountain? What is the truth of the Earth? The mountains are the truth of the Earth. No, the oceans are the truth of the Earth. What is the truth of the elephant in the room? The trunk, the ears, the tail, the butt, the legs, When we nitpick, this is the hole we get into, my truth versus your truth. But the fact is, for me, truth has to be beyond logic, because logic is only a portion of the mind. Logic is only a portion of the way we think, let alone the way we are. Very, very tiny portion. So if you think you can find truth with logic, that's like trying to encompass the world, with a teaspoon. It's not going to work, You can say, oh, this is the Earth is the dirt, and that's it. So this is my truth. Your truth means that it's diamonds or whatever. So we just end up being divided, and if we are divided, we are conquered. So what we need to do is not mesh ourselves under a homogeneous medium. Truth can sustain diversity. Otherwise, in my honest opinion, it wouldn't be truth. It would just be a smear. So I'm saying this in order to initiate again the topic of Activation 101 or Empowerment 101 from my perspective. Prior to this, in the previous video, I talked about a simple act of paying attention beyond logic in order to understand how our environment speaks to us. Is it speaking deliberately? You don't even have to think that. You could just say, well, this is natural feedback. If I engage in the world, if I engage with myself, there's feedback. I'm getting something from it. It's not just me being there mindlessly or mindfully acting. There's also a reaction. It's not a mechanical thing. It's an organic feedback. And so if our presence in the world is meaningful on a foundation of what we might call truth, then that means our engaging with the world is meaningful. And if it's meaningful, then every perception has meaning. There's no such thing as meaningless, even whether it's negative or positive or whatever. There is something we can do with it in order to, shall we say, nourish our purpose, our sense of meaning, our sense of what we want, what we desire, truthfully. Not just what we desire out of habit or what we desire out of being brainwashed or what we desire to compensate for, being attacked in all of these things. Those are not true desires, in my opinion. They are defensive reactions, and they result from suppression of desires. Guilt is that. Guilt is not a feeling, for example. Guilt is a thought form suppressing our true nature. And so we're suppressing ourselves, and it hurts. You release the cause of guilt, which is an idea that you are to blame for something, then you feel a whole bunch of fear because your compressed desire nature is trying to expand and stretch, and the blood flow causes pins and needles in your psyche, and all of these things you are adjusting. Many times our emotions of fear and rage are an adjustment, just like disease can be an adjustment, as Ron said, of the body to conditions to which it is not accustomed, stressful conditions. So all of these things need to be taken into account when we are considering activation. The thing is that activation itself is a fancy word. In the past, you had these shamans, okay? And I spoke of shamanism again because it's primordial. It's not religiously affiliated. It's not affiliated with dogma. But too many people have ideas of neo-shamanic rattle shaking and dancing around the fire and eating ayahuasca or whatever, and I don't know what, wearing masks and animal spirits and this and that. That is one expression. The word shaman, magus, sorcerer, wizard, witch, these just mean wise person. They don't mean that. They mean a wise person. What is a wise person? A wise person has knowledge, understands that knowledge, and is able to apply that understanding. Not just apply the knowledge like a scientist does as a technique, but the wise person applies their understanding. They don't stand under it. They penetrate their engagement and completely are embodying it, and they experience it as they experience themselves. You identify with what you get, then you understand it. If you can identify with another person, then you understand them. That's what understanding is. And so you cannot understand jack shit unless you have empathy. Empathy in the mental plane, empathy in the emotional plane, even physical empathy to understand how a sensation in your body can be reflected. Oh, somebody's hurting, a child hurts his knee. You empathize because you can relate to that sensation because you may have hurt your knee, or you can imagine it. Now, psychopaths have no empathy whatsoever, so they have no understanding whatsoever. I mean, that's one thing you need to know. So you say, oh, they're so powerful. Well, imagine people with no capacity to understand crap. Nothing. They understand nothing. They know a lot. They have to compensate with knowledge, which is just data acquisition. But what do they do with that data? They can't do jack shit with it that's real or truthful because they have no understanding. So they have to simply apply that knowledge in accordance to whatever sick impulses they have. Their disconnection. They're damned. Damned means being outside of the light, the divine presence, outside of the cause of the truth, of the meaning of existence, of reality. Outside of that, you are exiled into, I wouldn't even call it darkness, meaninglessness. You are exiled into meaninglessness. So a human being or any being exiled into meaninglessness is insane. And they have no understanding, they have no connection. You have to feel, you can't even feel sorry for such a being because you cannot empathize with that because you would have to negate yourself to do it. And once you reclaim yourself, you have no connection. The only dynamic to which any truly empathic being cannot connect is lack of connection. Complete alienation. However, they can connect with how it feels to a certain degree because all of us have parts of our being that are psychopathic, that are disconnected. All of us are fragmented. So all of us have portions. This is very paradoxical because although you cannot identify with an absolute state of disconnection, with being a fragment, because if you do, it's ultimately the most painful thing you can experience on any level. However, and so thus it is the most denied and avoided thing. And thus you cannot heal anything if you completely identify with it without anything else. The only way you can heal it is if you can synthesize the identification with something ultimately horrific, like psychopathy, beyond identifying with a victim. Identifying with a victim is very, very easy. Actually, being a victim is far more pleasant than being a perpetrator and completely identifying with where that perpetrator is. So the only way these perpetrators can actually function in existence, not just in the world, is to master denial. They have to master denial so much that their state is completely, they're oblivious to their state, but not only that, the symptoms of their state, the actual effect of their meaninglessness has to be hoisted on others. They have to perpetually make others suffer so they don't experience the suffering of their disconnected state. So if we don't take responsibility for them, who cannot understand jack shit, And if we naively think we can make them understand without taking responsibility for what they are inside ourselves, we are, in my honest opinion, vastly deluded. We are as much deluded as they are, because actually it's the inner psychopath that's telling us not to engage. It's the inner psychopath that's convincing us, without us even knowing it, to keep a distance between us and the outer psychopath. Which is basically a distance between us and the inner psychopath. I'm talking about psychological distance. I'm not talking about physical distance. Okay? So who is the shaman? Well, the shaman is the one who can engage. The shaman can engage with everything. And how do I know this? Well, what creates a shaman in the old traditions, in the old ways, in the prehistoric things? A crisis creates a shaman. Everybody has the potential. But how do you cultivate that potential? Well, you got to work with what you've got. You've got to work with nature. We would like God to just pat us on the head and have us awaken. However, God will be able to do that after we awaken. That's the paradox. He can't do that unless we have the channels to reach out, because manifestation is a closed system on purpose, just like a seed is a closed system, until you water it and everything like that, until it actually is under the right conditions to blossom. So until we are under the right conditions to open ourselves up, which are also conditions that has to foster our structure, because if we fluidize too much, we disintegrate. Energy matter has to be balanced. This is manifestation. We're talking about an infinite force of creation condensing itself into a defined structure that can actually be mobile with energy. This is an intricate balance. I mean, you're the ultimate being, say. You're God. You're goddess. You're all of this. And you desire to create something that you're not, which is a structured, intimate, individualized, separate, diverse reality frame. And yet all you have is just love and unity in the eternal and infinite frame. So how do you do this? Well, you express yourself. It's your desire. I mean, in my honest opinion, there was no effort. It was a natural, organic dynamic. It's in the nature of existence. We're just conditioned to think that the nature of the existence cannot be self-sustaining. Somebody has to cause it from the outside, because we've been conditioned from psychopathy that there is an outside. Within existence, the only thing that exists is an inside. Let's put it this way. There's an inside in us, right? But our environment is another inside. It's just an inversion of our own inside. If you want to talk about true outside, you have to go outside of divinity. You have to go outside of meaning. You have to go alienate yourself. And however, whatever happened, the fact remains that, practically speaking, it's up to us to trigger our own awakening, because divine initiative has been implanted in us for that very reason. And the only thing, because we're geared to sustain our structure, to be conservative, to want peace, to not want any change, but at the same time, we're schizophrenic, naturally speaking. We want peace, but then we get bored if we have too much of it. We want peace, but we want excitement and challenge, which means we want something to resist us in a benign way. Even love is friction to a certain degree. However, friction creates warmth and sustains us. The psychopath takes the love out of all of that and then causes pain. When you're alienated and it's meaningless. But when you have love, the wheels of creation are always greased. So anything that's apparently separate is really connected. Anything that's apparently divisive is really integrated behind the scenes along some lines. Your truth and my truth are actually a single truth, but so complex and diverse that we don't have to compromise. We can still go our own ways. I prefer my facet of truth. You prefer your facet of truth. I prefer to be on my side of the globe. You can be on your side of the globe, but we're not going to leave the earth. We don't have to. It sustains both of us. I prefer to live by the beach. Somebody wants to live in the mountains. They still live on the same planet. We're still alive. We still breathe the same air. All of this is how I understand truth. Now, when I say so, a shaman, basically, all the normal prehistoric people lived in the village, whatever, in their community, hunting, gathering, doing whatever, fighting the other villagers and this and that. And so, however, they were at the mercy of the conservative forces of nature, whose job it is to keep things going. They don't have, for example, you don't have the awakened intelligence to tell each of your cells what to do. They have a certain, coding. They have a certain set of instructions. You can tell your organs to move, your muscles and all of this, and act in a certain way, but you're not so connected that you can do this. If you awaken, you can. You create an interconnection, a more intricate complexity, but you need to do it on your own initiative for it to be self-sustaining. Thus, you need to be motivated. But if you're not motivated, it won't happen. 9:09. That's what the clock says. So, again, signs and portents. What word did I use? Motivation. Motivation is what causes activation. Even when you pay attention, you need to be motivated to pay attention. Motivation is passion. That's as it grows. Mobilization happens from motivation. If you're going to speak out, you need to be motivated to speak out. I can't speak out because Ron tells me to speak out, or because I'm being guilt-tripped into speak out, or because I'm just afraid. I want to be self-sustainingly motivated. So deep down, there were some people who were motivated to become more than just what the tribe was. And yet the tribe kept pulling them back, kept saying, no, that's not normal. This is whatever. You have to, and their own bodies did, because they were used to sustaining health in a certain way. Nature had its own so-called ecosystemic balance. To transcend and evolve, you have to disrupt the existing balance. You can do it in a benign way, but you have to be masterful to do it in a benign way. Otherwise, things are very, very crude. So, and in our crisis situation, they're even cruder. So what do? Well, you go through a crisis. A shaman would go through. The thing is that the shamans realized this, and they said, okay, look, villagers, you're not going to go beat the guy up or kill him or kill her because they are becoming a shaman. So why should we care? Because the shaman is the one that's going to tell you how to deal with diseases, how to deal with war, how to deal with, food depletion, where to go and get your food, and how to deal with the weather problems and environmental issues. The shaman is going to sustain the prosperity of the village or the community. So it's in your best interest to support this guy. And so they did. So they said, oh, somebody's becoming, instead of saying, oh my God, they're weird, they're freaking out, they're going through a crisis, they're schizophrenic, they're frothing at the mouth, and killing the person, clubbing them, as probably happened originally. Instead, they say, oh, they bow down to the person now. See how attitudes shift, even in prehistoric humanity. An attitude shifted. They bow down to the person because the person was an investment, but also they loved the fact that this power of change was in their vicinity, that this shaman was one of their own. It wasn't just the self-serving type of thing. It was basically, this shaman was born of our community. They didn't just pop up out of a vacuum. And so he is our child, the child of our community. So they identified with him because they shifted their perspective. But that's as far as they could go. The shaman, however, needed to shift his or her perspective way more. So the shaman's body went into a fever, or the shaman went schizophrenic for a time, or the shaman was possessed, or the shaman had an accident and had to, burns or maybe lost a limb or something. Many, many things of a crisis. And it's like, well, what? You mean we have to be beat up to grow? No. Recovery from a crisis is what activates inner power, not the crisis itself. The crisis is a stimulus toward recovery. If we could stimulate recovery without a crisis, we would do it. But we don't want to. Nothing evolves in a vacuum. Everything evolves in an environmental feedback complexity, just like relationships do not grow or die because of one person alone. It always takes two to tango. So you as an individual and your environment are one entity, but more like an intimate relationship. Your lover is your environment, or your enemy is your environment, or the bastard that doesn't care is your environment. Take your choice. But if you want to, the first step into creating your reality is addressing your attitude. Look at how the reality of the prehistoric people changed once they realized the value of the shaman. Now, the fact is, schizophrenia does not, people are simplistic. So some shamans, because of all they had to confront, including the issues of the underworld and cosmic insanity, cosmic level insanity, and we're talking about something that I believe, you don't have to bring Anunnakis and all that into the picture. We'll just say this: any being that evolves sentience and neurological complexity challenges nature's ability to keep that complexity stable. Okay? Which means basically that beings that are upright and have a complex nervous system and can think and all of that stuff, like humans do, are prone to insanity. Animals are not so much prone, not insanity, not like insanity as in brain damage so much as in psychopathic effects. You don't really have psychopathy in the animal kingdom, I don't know how anybody would interpret it, but I have never seen a psychopathic dog or a cat. I've seen a rabid dog or a cat, and an angry. I've seen an insane cat that's homicidal, that seems psychopathic, that attacks, but that's an obvious, brain damage type thing. It's a genetic defect, so to speak. And you say psychopaths are too. It's more complex than that, because when you're sentient, then you are in automatic access to levels of consciousness that perceive the deeper dynamics of the cosmos without even realizing it logically, which means that if there is an issue in the cosmos that God can only resolve within creation, as opposed to, as a cause of creation, shall we say, the sentient beings are going to realize it. This is why I'm highly skeptical about benign extraterrestrials, They probably have their problems with psychopathy. If they would have resolved those problems, we would have had, out of contagion or out of whatever, the immunity boost to that. We would have had an influence that would have done something. But so far, what has happened is we have activation potential. And thus, nobody is giving us an environment to activate that potential in a way that is loving and benign. So what I see from the situation is that we are the engine of our own activation in our feedback with the environment. Signs and portents is one way. Our sense of meaning is paramount. Understanding what it means to be loving, but at the same time to embrace the truth, even if the data and the facts writing the truth are uncomfortable. But not submitting to the discomfort, not jumping to the conclusions of saying it's hopeless or whatever. The fact is, I don't want it to be hopeless. I don't want to submit. It is meaningless for me to be born in this world and have a loving heart or whatever, and that sense of aspiration, and just give up. That means my truth, defeat is not my truth. Victory is my truth. Peace that's dynamic and challenging is not my truth. Not passive peace, not a perpetual lying down on the beach and doing nothing or playing video games type truth or whatever, because we get bored for a reason. We get bored because we need to engage. It is our meaning. It's who we are. It's our nourishment. So all of these things, there are many people that do not consider these things because they want an immediate solution. They want to go out and protest because it's just simple. Or they want to boycott something because it's simple. Nobody's going to buy. All they have to do is just not buy something. Oh, sure, I can do without that. That's no problem. Or, go and not vote or vote. These are all trappings of society. I mean, these are all processes that, if the media actually doesn't demonize it, then it's not going to work. Okay, that's a hard and fast rule. If you're not being terrorized by society for something you want to do or be, whether you're ridiculed, kind of benign level terrorism, or whether you're actually attacked, then it's probably not going to work. But at the same time, just because you're terrorized doesn't mean it's going to work. Because you can go out, grab a gun, and start shooting people, and of course you'll be declared a terrorist, and then, it's not going to work, because what's the point? That's what psychopaths do. They play their games. To them, war is a game. It's a game like a casino game, where the winner takes all. So because they have no sense of meaning, no sense of connection. And yet they do, because they're inside of us. They don't have a sense of connection, but that doesn't mean there is no connection. And that's what we need to awaken. If you want karma to affect the psychopath, you have to connect. You have to awaken, not just your own potential, but the connection of the psychopath to creation, the intrinsic organic connection of the psychopathic being to whatever soul they may have started out with, which is your soul. You are the sanity of the psychopathic insanity, the sane reflection. If the psychopath is our dark side, we are their bright side. And they're trying to kill their bright side because they cannot take the knowledge or the understanding of psychopathy itself. But how can they take it if we can't? Because we have more resources than they do. We have a capacity for understanding. It was 919 before. And so from motivation, we move into understanding. Understanding is empathy, not just loving, I empathize, whatever. It means actually identifying with things and finding something within yourself that you see outside of yourself. All of these things are not really, they're more like psychological stuff. I'm saying really prioritize your data, first of all. Prioritize your data. And many people do that instinctively. Prioritizing your data means, you can go off into far-flung theories on the one end of the spectrum, or you can go into psychological self-improvement or mystical self-improvement on the other side of the spectrum, or you can go into social activation, being an activist socially, or maybe even a spectator. Oh, what's this dragon guy doing? Oh, what's the other person doing? Oh, let's keep on the newest, it's like a soap opera, Or you can just organize and, you may consider these your priorities, but at the same time, you won't be effective in these priorities unless you connect the dots with the full spectrum somehow. You need to understand what's going on within you. You need to have a sense of greater meaning in the cosmos that's not just, ephemeral. And you need to be involved in the social dynamics, at least to understand them, so you can connect dots within your own sense of meaning. You need to define your reality as opposed to having your reality defined for you. We have said that often. Many people say that. But what does it mean? Where do you base that definition, if my truth and your truth, and what's the truth? Well, this very quest for the so-called truth is almost like a fear of standing up for yourself, because you want the truth to take care of you. The truth to set you free. Well, if the truth is your nature, then being yourself is going to set you free. The truth is the essence of your being, but how do you connect with that? Well, what's your inherent sense of meaning? You remember what we said about the hierarchy of principles. Principles are not just arbitrary ethics in order to keep things going. Principles represent our inherent sense of meaning. They are meaningful for us. I abide by my principles because I desire to do so. It makes me feel whole. These principles basically make me feel okay with myself. I look myself in the mirror, I live by my principles, and I like what I see. I have a relationship with myself that's not just unconditionally loving. It's a relationship based on my choices of meaning, which are genuine and authentic. If you are authentic, as opposed to being factual, some people confuse truth with fact, like I said, or authenticity with facts. Truth is more connected to authenticity than it is to facts and data. So if we are authentic with ourselves, and only we can know that, then nobody can fool us as easily, because we always have a touchstone. We always have our personal Rosetta Stone. Authenticity is our personal Rosetta Stone. And that means you have to know yourself. And this is where the shamanic crisis again came in. The shamanic crisis was basically forced the candidate shaman to know themselves on a deeper level than any of their villagers, any of their relatives, any of their friends, any of their comrades. This person had to know themselves, and when they knew themselves or engaged in the arena of knowing themselves, they entered the spirit world. They entered the underworld, what psychologists call the subconscious, which is not just personal. It's collective, it's universal, there's a whole arena of it, to the point they saw it as a world and interacted with it. These things can open up differently in each of us. But the important thing is, how do we get rid of the brainwashing? Well, you said it yourself. There was that woman who basically was in a loving environment as a victim. But I'm not speaking to that kind of audience. I'm not speaking to people who are so victimized they don't even know their names anymore. They don't even know what it means to make a fundamental choice and know that it's yours. I'm speaking to people who are already along a certain path of awakening, already knowing that you put one foot in front of the other foot. The problem is that they may be used to smooth ground or socially approved ground in a certain way, or socially approved to a certain extent, where if there's a pothole, they may trip and fall. If there's a boulder, they may not know how to get around it or climb over it. If there's a log in their way, they won't know what to do, and they won't know how to make a detour. It's not just about putting one foot in front of the other. You need to adapt to the path itself. So I'm speaking to people who have that capacity, and each of you will awaken different abilities that may not be defined in any book. It may simply be the ability to intuitive how to respond to a given situation in a constructive for you manner. I'm not speaking again to people who are going to come and say, well, I lost my house and I lost everything and I don't know whatever. Well, if you're alive, you're speaking from somewhere. Or if you have only 5 seconds to live, that's another story. But at this point, none of us can actually provide instant broad spectrum answers to anybody. In my opinion, the most successful contribution is made to those who are most capable of acting, not acting comfortably necessarily. So only you know how strong you are. Only you know how determined you are, no matter what. You can be lying, diagnosed with cancer, and perhaps you can engage in some form of self-healing that will laugh in the face of the establishment, but you don't have to publicize it. It can be your private attempt at shamanic initiation. Your house may be taken. That is another form of shamanic initiation. These people, these psychopaths, are like the demons afflicting the ancient shamans. Why did the demons afflict them? They afflicted them because the shaman themselves wanted to transform, because they were not satisfied with the status quo. Even if it was peaceful, even if it was an ecosystem, even if it was an indigenous paradise, it wasn't good enough. It was like a Garden of Eden, restricted. They wanted more. Just like we want more. Even if you live in a gilded cage, it's still a cage. Even if they give you 3 square meals a day, your favorite mate, all the TV you want, you're in a cage, you're under house arrest, you won't be happy, especially if you don't let your sense of purpose expand and grow as it wants to. You will only be happy for a certain time. Maybe you'll be happy for 100 lifetimes. What happens on the 101st? Let's put it that way. We're not talking about, just give me a little bit of rest here, because when you're under crisis, you go back to the old ways. Just put me back in that garden. I'm fine. Put me back in the playpen. And yes, you may need some rest time, but that's also a shamanic challenge, to be able to demand that you need your rest time, and as soon as you will be rested to a certain point, you will get up and continue. Is it a struggle? It may seem that way. I would call it an engagement. 2 lovers, when they get together, they get engaged. So they get engaged in order to be married, to become one. When you engage with an enemy, it's a similar dynamic, except there is no love. So we are encompassing a situation where something is trying to wage war on us, and we are engaging with them. So let's call it an engagement that's violent at first, that's fragmentary, unloving. But what if we generate love? So do we give them love? How can we? Their love receptors are burned out. All we can do is give love where love is desired. First to the victim, first to ourselves, first to our environment, first as an oceanic sense of being immersed in love by accepting ourselves. All of these things are common sense, really, if you think about them. It's stepping back from the presentation and defining your own stance, where you are, where you want to go in your terms. Really think about your terms, understand your terms, put yourself in the place of your own position. Many of us don't know how we feel. I mean, you say, I feel like this, okay, but do you understand yourself? If you were your best friend, would you understand yourself? Let's put it that way. If you were your best friend, would you able to comprehend, where you're coming from? Or would you be impatient, like the ambassador is impatient with people? The guy has certain understandings, and he sees people not being able to, quote unquote, get it, but does he really understand where they're coming from? Down there in the middle of being the target of the most proficient mind control known to man. They've had, millennia to perfect the techniques of how to keep us down, just as we had millennia to access our own potentials. They're there. But I see a kind of almost a balance. Yeah, they seem to be the most, but we're always asking the enemy to tell us what to do. We're asking the enemy to tell us how possible it is for us to overcome it. By enemy, I mean adversary, the one who is pitted against us. I don't mean, in a actual, that is the inherent evil enemy. No, the disease is an enemy. Cancer is an enemy, but cancer is also our own cells mutated against us. We want to heal it, however that's going to happen. So I just want to give a general overview now that I want to continue along this train of thought. I want to continue along this way of, let's look between the lines. Let's look under the radar. Let's lift up certain stones of what we take for granted. And we don't know that we take something for granted when we take it for granted until it's, so it's like, well, I already know what I'm taking for granted. No, otherwise solutions would be pouring in like raindrops, because they're there. The fact is, if we don't have solutions popping in like that, that means we are blocking them. We take things for granted and we're being brainwashed. What is the symptom of being brainwashed? Feeling powerless. Feeling like your choices are not having results and that you can't even make a choice. So either your choices are not yours or you're blocked from expressing them in some way. So paying attention is important. But motivation is the engine of our attention, and our sense of meaning is something we need to discover. So this is, you might say, my first general rambling exposition on Activation 101, the basics, because you can't go around and dogmatize it. I'm speaking generally for a reason, to help people to think about it. Much of what I said is almost cliche-like. Yeah, much of what I said is all other people have said it, but I'm putting it into a certain context. And I want people to kind of absorb it and not just think about it, but feel into it and get a sense of what your personal sense of true meaning is. Not just what would make you happy or take you away from the pain or just give me some money and I'll be fine. Those are kind of fail-safes or whatever, just patchwork stuff. That symptom, that's like taking aspirin to get rid of a headache and not looking at the deeper issues. I'm talking about who you are and what your strengths are. What would you like your strengths to be? What kind of life would you really like? And if you're so far gone that you don't know what love is, that it's so far gone that you have no memory of ever feeling love or expressing love, then you're in a very difficult situation. Because if you think love is a drug or something that you just pour out, because you may be pouring out addiction or passive-aggressive manipulation or whatever. So, but if you do have a sense of what love is, then, use that as the foundation of your sense of meaning without making demands on love. Without saying love has to do this. Love doesn't have to do anything. Love is the foundation of everything else. It's everything else that we need to cultivate once that foundation is there. And if we don't feel it strongly, we can know that it's there. If you know love is there, just open up and say, okay, now I know love is there. Eventually, it'll start working through your systems and activating your DNA, because that may be just the first step. So try that. Know that love is there, and eventually there will be hints. And as that happens, your sense of meaning what is meaningful to you, what drives you, can actually correlate and open up a dialogue even with a psychopathically programmed environment. There are always loopholes within it. It's 9:33. I'll end it here. Thank you very much once again for bearing with me. These are not easy topics to express in a way that, people might understand without scratching their heads or throwing tomatoes at me. So once again, thank you. And I hope to continue along the same lines in future videos.
Okay, thank you, Aristo, and you have a great week, and we'll talk to you next Thursday or Friday, whichever day is convenient for you next week.
Okay.
So thank
We'll figure it out.
you.
Okay. Thank you, Ron.
Yeah.